This video is critical to your freedom. If you get what we're telling you, what is in front of your eyes in media every day, and in this Gates video, then download the MP4, link in the description, get it onto your channel, get it out to other channels, get it out to online media channels. Make it so big they can't shut it down. Your freedom depends on it. On the 3rd March, when key countries, including China and its worst-hit province Hubei, looked like this at left, Prime Minister Johnson and UK Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty informed Britain that we faced 80% infected, 53 million, of which 1% might die, 530,000. The figures were plucked out of thin air, justified by a model. The real world offered zero evidence for or against those numbers. I'll show analysis like the chart at left full screen for a few seconds in case you want to take a snapshot and share it. By the 16th, however, when Imperial College COVID-19 response team issued their report, the situation had changed dramatically. China and its worst-hit region Hubei had both curled over, the characteristic flattening of the curve for a normal distribution virus progress. It was never exponential. The 3rd March figures were shown to be irresponsible and absurd. There was no case now for the government's original stance. A schoolchild could now read that in the worst-hit province in China, hit 50 to 100 times worse than its next rivals, the contagion would reach no more than around 110,000 cases per 100 million people, and deaths would be around 3,000 in a population of 59 million. Translating to the UK at 66 million, at 10%, that would be a comparable worst case of 3,300. The Prime Minister would be obliged to offer an embarrassing retraction. Instead, the ICCRT report was published, and the only real-world data point was entirely ignored. An absurd and irresponsible original warning had now been reinforced by scientific evidence of a model that was as useless as a weather prediction that tomorrow temperatures would reach 8,000 degrees. Far from being called on this absurdity, not one source or observer in Britain or the world spoke up to challenge such a dire and unwarranted claim. It was now official diktat that Britain faced an existential crisis of 81% infected, 510,000 deaths, and the US 2.2 million deaths. Had the figures been justified as solar radiation deaths or little green men deaths, they could not have been more unjustified, and yet the entire of the British media, finance, research and university scholars raised not a murmur of protest. By the 23rd, when Boris Johnson addressed the nation, the curves as reported by China had shown that China overall and Hubei were definitively over. The coronavirus risk was slight, with the protected, lockdown, other Chinese provinces experiencing minimal exposure, and the unprotected, worst-hit Hubei experiencing 3,085 deaths in a population of 59 million people. This entire fiasco could be put to bed. There would have to be an inquiry, of course. Dame Deirdre Hines' report on COVID-19, published last Friday, acquits all involved of blame for spending $1.2 billion on a pandemic that turned out to be mild. The response, says Dame Deirdre, was proportionate and effective, though there could have been more flexibility in planning and implementation. The government, it seems, has whitewashed its behaviour, as we might have expected. Not everyone agrees with their conclusion. But first appearances can be deceptive. Estimating deaths is something of an arcane art, in which statistics plays an important role as the virus itself. Very few deaths are ever proven to have been caused by the virus alone, just a handful in most years. The rest are a result of examining excess deaths and attributing a proportion of them to the complications such as pneumonia. This process is not always made clear. See, for example, below from the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Liam Donaldson. Sir Liam Donaldson? Isn't the UK CMO Chris Whitty? Indeed, the government, of course, has no intention of backing down from its stance, but has instead used all the machinery of the state to proceed on the basis of invented figures to a complete martial lockdown of Britain, enforced by the police and with unlimited fines for disobedience. Those quotes were taken from a piece stumbled across while looking for a figure for flu deaths in Britain. Nigel Hawkes of straightstatistics.fullfacts.org gives us a prescient glimpse of our future even if the government were to back down, and it shows no intention of doing so. That was a 2010 article for swine flu, with only a few words removed to avoid giving the game away too early. Influenza, pneumonia, bronchitis and asthma killed 29,000 Britons a year, declares the Mail in 2014. A comparable figure today would be 30,360. Hang on a second. At a time when the best real-world worst-case estimate would have been 3,451 deaths from COVID-19, 3085 Hubei times 66 divided by 59.17, this country officially already had 30,360 deaths a year from other respiratory diseases including the flu. We've been forced into pandemic shock and enforced lockdown and destruction of our lives, livelihoods, economy and democracy when 9 times the real-world justified estimated deaths were already dying from other respiratory diseases and illnesses. We reached peak unequivocally on the 12th, despite a second fraudulent statement by the UK CMO on 12th March that the earliest possible estimated peak will be 21st May. Yet here we are already at peak with 9,875 deaths reported for the 12th April 2020 in the World Health Organization Daily Situation Reports, even disregarding the egregious death stuffing going on. Doubling it, symmetrical peak gives us 19,750 deaths. $19,750 deaths is way more than a Hubei level contagion, with a Hubei level death rate, making it already a massive issue in terms of how a first world population managed to fare nearly 6 times worse than a, with all respect, not quite so fortunate population. Yet to discover at this late hour that such an egregious figure, 6 times higher than reasonable first estimates, is still not even 2/3 of our ordinary annual respiratory disease deaths of 30,360, and we are locked down with no hope of respite until vaccines? We are, if you hadn't heard, waiting on Herr Gates to deliver truckloads or plane loads of vaccines so that we can be vaccinated and don't expect a choice, before we can expect a return to normal. Their new normal, a normal where Bill Gates has basically the whole world vaccinated for COVID-19, as we'll hear in the Fox video. PM Trudeau has already given the good news to Canada, while we get to hear it from officials. Let us summarise then the situation. A virus that should reasonably have managed to kill only 3,451 Britons has managed to kill 3 times as many already in a more advanced country. It will likely kill 19,750 Britons, but that's still less than 2/3 of the 30,360 Britons who die of similar respiratory diseases every year. And we're in lockdown, about to be submitted to mandatory vaccines. We weren't given a choice about lockdown. I very much doubt we'll be given a choice about vaccines. You want to buy food, go into a shop, you need to submit to the vaccine. In all seriousness, if I had a shotgun right now, I'd be tempted to use it, either on myself or the people who have unleashed a criminal scam of epic proportions on the planet. All, it seems, guided by this man, Bill Gates. Scare the people, get them into their homes, no out till vaccines are available, mandatory vaccines, $78 billion a year, rinse and repeat. Did I miss anything? And Chris Wallace is nearly gushing as he describes the prescient philanthropist Bill Gates, who not only predicted the whole thing in 2015, But he's donated $100 million to accelerate the 78 billion vaccine hit that the world is about to be subjected to. That, by the way, comfortably exceeds the $59.2 billion entire global vaccine market for 2020, assuming $10 a shot for the vaccine. At $1 a shot, it's $7.8 billion, or double the entire global flu vaccine market. If I had $100 million to fast-track a $7.8 billion market, hell, I'd go for it. And if some naive, gushing show host gave me credit for predicting this 5 years prior, then fine, who cares? And if all it required was a press conference to announce a scary figure instead of a realistic one, whereupon nobody would bother with lockdown or vaccines, it would be the simplest and biggest scam in history, and all I'd need to do would be to get a couple of PMs and a chief medical officer on board. So let's hear either the architect or one of the architects of this massive windfall for pharmaceutical companies, Big Pharma, as he repeatedly lies through his teeth, misrepresenting fact and offering absurd, alarmist nonsense that none of the 26 million viewers apparently has questioned. I take that back, some of us surely have, but we don't have the power to do anything about it, do we? Maybe. If you haven't seen the Fox News interview, it would be worth your while watching it in its natural form before returning to watch this analysis. We will be playing the video roughly one sentence at a time and making observations. If our claims are not self-evidently accurate, then please watch our other videos. We may engage in some analysis briefly here, but would prefer not to extend the video to an unreasonable degree. We will now read our statement, which has been sitting at bottom left, at which point we will clear it to be able to use the space for text recording statements in the video. We acknowledge Fox News as the owner and the copyright holder of the above video. We play the entire video with observations and analysis at right. We consider this to be fair use in a matter of the gravest urgency and public interest. All opinions and analysis are our own and may be explored in our 22 other videos, particularly the original March 24th video. In this video, Bill Gates will inform you of the following, a tale you are no doubt already familiar with. The coronavirus presents a huge threat. Quarantine is and remains the only valid action in response to this threat. Quarantine is a holding measure until testing and vaccines are available. Vaccines are the only way to counter the devastating threat of the virus. Lessons learned, we will not be so vulnerable again. Trudeau, Gates and UK officials repeated the same essential message in an apparently coordinated effort. There will be no normal until vaccines are available. Chris Wallace announces with some awe that the source video has been watched 26 million times. It is surprising then that Mr. Gates is still a free man. I think there are perhaps two accurate statements consistent with a concerned citizen in the entire video. Disregarding dross, which will be evident because we do not comment, we will distinguish statements and key phrases by highlighting them in colour and commenting.
I want to play a clip for you that's been viewed more than 26 million times.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
Not a good start for Mr. Gates. Anything? Well, firstly, life kills more than 57 million people each year, so if anything, suggesting implausibility, is in fact common and inevitable each year. Indeed, that is at the heart of the fraud being perpetrated on a global scale. People hypnotized by the media seem to have forgotten a couple of simple facts. Firstly, they are at risk of dying every day. Anyone who has not recognized that it is a good idea to check before crossing the road will not live very long. Anyone who has recognized that they should check must also recognize the reason. If they don't, they could be injured or die. Anyone suggest shutting down society because people walk in front of trucks? I didn't think so. So, Mr. Gates, every year something kills more than 10 million people. Life. Something which governments, the media, social media et al. Have been at pains to avoid recognizing. Sorry, I think we'd better make a note of that. And since Mr. Gates does make a couple of legitimate points in the course of the interview, we need a counter for that too. Rather than a war, I'm sorry, but we're discussing 400 million people actually locked down or under the threat of lockdown in the US, UK and Canada alone. In the UK, we are locked down, have drones operating against us, and in Wales it is now illegal to leave your home to exercise more than once a day. That isn't Britain, not the one that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents fought and died for to keep free. If I detect disingenuous distraction or misdirection, ignoring the elephant in the room, or other material matters, then I'm afraid I'm going to hold you to account. War is the least relevant source of death for humans. Life kills humans far more than war, year after year after year. That's 2. Next, look at causes. Here's the World Health Organization top 10 for human killers. Please note the link at the bottom of the page. If I use a chart that is not generated by ourselves, I'll try to ensure that the link is there. Almost certainly I'll mention the source in narrative. No attempt to avoid recognizing a third-party source is intended. But we are human, so we may inadvertently slip. It happens. Rarely, I hope, but it does. We're a bit crowded, and I appreciate that, but if you could read it, you'd basically get 9 million of heart disease, so nobody gets credit for 10 million straight off. However, all those blues are non-communicable diseases. I'll put the image up larger for a second so you can see I'm not trying to mislead you. So, non-communicable diseases will kill about 24 million people each year. Missed that one, did we, Bill? That's 3. Please note, if 66 million people, my people, fellow Britons, weren't confined to their homes, I could care less what nonsense Herr Gates peddled, and whether there were people sufficiently naive to believe it. However, when that same 66 million people walk into their homes without a single person raising their hand to say, excuse me, then it's time to cut the BS and reveal the nonsense that's being used to confine you. Next, it's most likely to be an infectious virus, killing more than 10 million people. Okay, let's check. The reds are respiratory, diarrhea, and tuberculosis. Respiratory is a virus, that's flu, etc. Diarrhea can be a virus, but doesn't have to be. And TB isn't, so 3 plus a half of 2 equals 4 is way less than 10, so sorry Bill, likely it is not. Oh, but this is novel, it could happen. Yes, as a mathematician, little green men could fly down from Mars and kill all of us, but the 5 deadliest contagions in history, per the link below, were Black Death, 1350, 75 million, Spanish flu, 1918, 50 million, AIDS, 1980, 25 million, Plague of Justinian, 541 AD, 25 million, Antonine Plague, 150 AD, 5 million. 5 contagions in 2,000 years is not something likely in the next few decades, so no, that's 4 falsehoods, and he hasn't even started the interview yet. Unfortunately, we've just seen that people are doing his job for him, supporting false memes and aggressively targeting critical thinkers. That's 2 strikes against sheeple. We need a counter for that too. 2 strikes against the sheeple.
That was Bill Gates back in 2015, 5 years ago, warning about precisely the kind of threat we're all facing right now. Since then, Gates has been doing everything he can to prevent a pandemic.
We're going to have to move along, else this will be an hours-long video. For God's sake, this is horrifying and absurd, but we're just going to tell you the bullet point form and hope you bother to do some fact-checking and wake up. Gates tells you everything right here in this video, and 26 million watched it and had no idea. Warning about, dreaming about. Precisely the kind of threat, precisely the kind of scary story. To create a panic-demic. That's 3 in one sentence. Nice going.
2 months ago, the Gates Foundation committed $100 million to fight the coronavirus. Earlier, I sat down with Bill Gates to discuss what we need to do now.
Fight the coronavirus, accelerate the production of the vaccine for the agenda. What we need to do now, what he and the agenda want you to do now. Sitting down with the architect or an architect of the fraudulent crime against humanity you're sleepwalking through. 3 more.
Bill, it took 4 months to reach 500,000 cases around the world and just 7 days to add another 500,000 cases. So how dangerous, how fearsome is this virus, and how do you see this epidemic playing out in the U.S.?
How dangerous, how fearsome. Easy lob to Herr Goebbels. How do you see this epidemic playing out in the US? How do you want us to see this playing out in the US? 2 more.
Well, this is a nightmare scenario because human-to-human transmissible respiratory viruses can grow exponentially.
Nightmare scenario. No, not for the virus. Nightmare scenario for the agenda scam. Yes. Exponentially false meme insertion. Exponentially on mainstream media, exponentially on social media, 3 against him, 2 against the sheeple. It doesn't grow exponentially. Even the agenda mouthpiece Imperial College COVID-19 response team knows that perfectly well, showing you a normal distribution. The false meme NHS and beds crisis, based on hugely exaggerated figures, shows a normal distribution. South Korea, done with the virus, shows a normal distribution, but fits slightly better with a log normal distribution. 3 sources that were in your face, but you had no idea what you were looking at and so believed, oh, it's exponential. 3 against the sheeple. And you went on social media and distributed stuff like this, doing the agenda's job for them, spreading the fear. Failure to fact check, failure to comprehend, collaborating with the enemy, 3 against the sheeple. The agenda is a nightmare scenario. He told you that straight out, and you had no idea he was telling a simple truth. The virus is not a nightmare scenario, and you had no idea he was lying to your face. 1 lie, 1 truth to Gates. 1 against the sheeple for total naivety, 1 against the sheeple for failure to fact check. You are living the biggest fake news story in history, and you haven't even figured it out yet. I offered it to Peter Hitchens and he said, can you make it simpler? How simple is 3085 times 66 divided by 59? Well, to the government that's 530,000. 2 against the sheeple.
And, if we had kept on going to work, traveling like we were, that curve would never bend until you had the majority of the people infected.
This was the first thing my viewers got to learn from our charts. The curves are not exponential and they were curling over, our term, even before they ordered you into lockdown. But you had no idea, didn't check, didn't argue, just went into your homes. Gates 1, sheeple 5. Here is a chart from our first ever presentation, March 24th, the day after I realized the public wasn't going to recognize the absurdities they were being spoon-fed because the PM had just ordered you into your homes and nobody said a word. Italy, already mature and well curled over at 100k cases per 100 million people, or 1 in 1,000 of the population, 0.1%, and you heard Gates say won't curl over till the majority have been infected, greater than 50%. He lied by a factor of 500 times, and you had no idea. Gates 1, sheeple 2, no checking, no idea. The UK Chief Medical Officer told you 80% infected, 53 million people, 1% dead, 530,000 people, and it went into the mainstream news with not one reporter doing their job. 80% divided by 0.1%, 800 times exaggerated, and you had no idea. Gates Agenda 2, sheeple 2. Hubei, one of 34 provinces that got hit, 50 to 100 times worse than its fellow provinces, the only place in the world where the virus was real. 3085 dead out of 59 million people, UK 66 million people, even using 3085 would only have been out by 10%, as a reasonable worst-case estimate. You own the only 4x4 in the world. The government says the viewer's 4x4 does 6,000 miles to the gallon. You know it only does 44. You know they lied. Why did you not do the most basic fact-checking before you went into your homes? Laziness, naivety, failure to fact-check, failure to remember WMD, failure to protect democracy, failure to question the government. Sheeple 6. It was already clear, as I showed to our viewers, the first 100k of them by 28th March, that Italy, Germany, Norway and likely UK would never exceed approx 200 to 260 cases per 100 million population. The virus was never a threat. The lies and agenda are a massive threat. Biggest story since Pearl Harbor, 6 biggest newspapers notified, not one got in touch, contacted Peter Hitchens, can you make it simpler? Sent numerous data-packed emails, no response. You are in your homes because the media could not be bothered to understand or reply to the one person who had all the data necessary to debunk the government lies even before April 1st. Wouldn't that have been appropriate? Biggest fake news in history, and it wasn't an April Fool prank. Agenda milestone achieved, Agenda 1. I can't even be bothered to penalise you and the hundreds of failures by the media. It is a massive, ongoing failure, and I see new absurdities every day. Growth in new cases is slowing down. Growth in new cases is slowing down from the very first day. That's what a normal distribution does. You cannot determine the effect of lockdown without a control. The course without lockdown are original projection. Theory failure, Sheeple 1. UK data and government statements are now truly bizarre. When that cone hits 1, we're at peak. That's the virus behaving perfect like a virus. The cone has not diverged from its path. Lockdown has had zero effect. The virus is an incredibly simple biomachine. It cannot panic, it just does what it does. But as we neared peak, it went haywire and spiked up when it should have spiked down. Politicians do panic, servants do panic, especially when their masters haven't got the vaccines ready. It's too early to let us out. What is a servant to do? Start inventing numbers? Maybe. "9 days after the infamous and absurd 53 million infected, 530,000 dead, 11 days before we would be incarcerated in our own homes, the same man issued a simple update. The estimate for peak cases, the day it would all begin to get better and we could breathe easier. It would literally be downhill from there. Worst over. What do you think he said and did? He took a simple chart left up to the blue line, and instead of extending the green line straight to where it would hit 12th of April, he gave his paymasters the longest possible time to get the vaccines out and available, 21st of May to 18th June. Paymaster? People are reporting that Chris Whitty received $40 million from Bill Gates in a foundation deal. Whatever. Go check it out. I do analysis, facts, virus statistics, and the way they reveal the fraud and the scam that have us locked down. I'll let others explore the web of bungs and cash, for now at least. It's so massive a failure on the media's on your part that my heart is filled with despair and sadness that you allowed this in the nation of the few, the Battle of Britain, the sacrifice of 2 world wars, utterly wasted because you couldn't be bothered to check. China lied. That's China, grey, with Italy, Norway, Germany and UK shooting past in that order. That's what China lied would have looked like if we were 1.4 billion people-sized nations like them. We're not. We're the size of Hubei, 59 million people orange line, and we're all headed to Hubei. China gave us the mortality figures, 0.2% under 50 to 14% over 80. Instantly, I saw this would not be a threat to society. And that's if you already have the virus and get symptoms. 80%, the UK Chief Medical Officer's figure. Call it half that for symptoms, 40%, or even 20%, who cares? Hubei, worst hit province in China, 59 million people, 67,794 cases, 0.115% infected with symptoms, 0.115%, and you believed 80% infected because it was in the Daily Lie paper. China gave us everything we needed to know to take the government down for its absurd lies. The UK government gave massive lies and you had no idea. And so you are in your homes. And still, that was March 24th when I published. March 15th, World Health Organization stopped publishing regional data in China because it was over. The government knew it was over and had these figures even as they told you to be scared. They knew the real risk of example, an 18-year-old dying in the worst hit real-world province in China, 50 times to 100 times worse than their neighbors. It was 0.115% times 0.2% equals 0.00023%, or 1 in 434,000. Lockdown may have saved the other provinces in China. It didn't save Hubei. Else we'd all be shooting way past Hubei, whereas since I started tracking and sharing, every country, most countries, have tracked directly to Hubei. China didn't lie. If they'd lied and said we only had 10 deaths in Hubei, we'd all be shooting past Hubei instead of having every country except a very few smart or lucky ones heading for Hubei. On March 15th, a week before the government decided to scare you, you could have looked up these figures, published them in the media, on social media, and the government would never have had the opportunity to scare you. On March 23rd, the UK Prime Minister and UK Chief Medical Officer decided that 3,085 times 66 divided by 59 equals 530,000, purely to scare you. And it worked. You're in your homes. And being the overindulged, self-absorbed people that most of the sheeple are, I have to read this today, published on the 10th of April, 18 days after the people could have put Johnson and the UK Chief Medical Officer in jail for incitement of terror, in jail for lying to the people, in jail for making you in fear for your lives. Oh, nobody knows anything. West doesn't trust China's COVID-19 figures, but are its own numbers any more meaningful? China didn't lie. The UK government did. China didn't lie. Bill Gates did. If we get out of this, it will be because of the data China gave us, the data that World Health Organization daily situation reports give us, and people like you who get that we were lied to and do something about it. It's not rocket science. On the same day or within days, in a coordinated campaign, Trudeau announced to Canada, no return to normal until vaccines. UK officials announced to Britain, no return to normal until vaccines. Gates announced to the US and the world, no return to normal until vaccines. You aren't getting out of your home until vaccines are available. And do you seriously think you'll have a choice when they are? The virus, it's a flu, whatever. It'll kill a few thousand in Britain. It should have been maybe 3,500 like Hubei. At double cases, it's 7,000. At double cases, double death rate, it's 14,000. That's 9 days normal deaths. We shut down for 9 days normal deaths? The agenda. No, we shut down because the government scared us deliberately to get us into our homes, drop the deaths if we obeyed, so we wait patiently for Herr Gates to get the vaccine ready, so we and the whole world can enjoy his state-enforced vaccine philanthropy. Big Pharma's big win. Global market for flu vaccine, $4 billion. Global market for all vaccines, $59 billion. 7.8 billion people in the world, pick a number, $10 a shot, 78 billion for COVID-19 virus vaccines. Double the global vaccine market at even $1 a shot. And all they had to do was stand up and tell you to go to your homes and wait for the vaccine. How terrifying is that? Not the virus, not even Bill Gates, but that you submitted to the destruction of democracy, the destruction of your lives and livelihoods, the destruction of your economies for a press conference. Look at the numbers. We haven't even started the interview. I didn't even bother penalizing you for all the failures and laziness and irresponsibility to date. And it's 13 to Gates and the agenda and 39 to you. You are 3 times more responsible for the biggest fake news scam in history than he is. Because you couldn't be bothered to take your responsibility as a citizen of a free country seriously, when others have died and died and died year after year to protect it for you. Redemption. When you finish this video, get up and walk outside and walk for freedom. Ignore the government. Ignore the police. Do not protest. That's a child whining. Do not express anger. Then you are the irresponsible one. Do not be anything other than a free and responsible citizen of a free nation. I love you. I honor you. I care for you. That's why I made 23 videos now, including this one. Please honor yourself and be free once more. And do not accept an apology. Do not accept a scapegoat. Everyone in authority, everyone in a uniform stands ready to shut you down until vaccines are available. You get 1 shot at freedom, or a lifetime of shots as a slave to Big Pharma and Bill Gates. Now, watch the rest of this video and we'll go at high speed, I hope, and I'll flash up the lies and falsehoods and propaganda as he promotes the agenda time after time. And then he tells a simple truth, his truth. Things won't go back to truly normal, our designed vaccine-dependent new normal for you, until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world. Redemption. I'm going to reset your counter. Your life starts now. Free or vaccine dependent, your call.
And then a massive number seeking hospital care and lots of deaths. So
Hospital care, NHS overload, agenda meme. Lots of deaths, exaggerated deaths, agenda meme. Gates 2.
You know, we've had to use quarantine, which is a old thing back from the days of the plague, as our primary tool.
Quarantine, social distancing lockdown, agenda goal. Keep you afraid and subdued until vaccines are ready. Gates 1. Plague, massive bogeyman from history. Agenda threat, agenda misdirection. Keep you afraid and subdued until vaccines are ready. Gates 1.
Fortunately, if we use that well enough, we should, towards the end of this month, start to see those numbers level off.
If we use that well enough, if you obey our need to keep you afraid and in your homes, agenda goal, Gates 1. Start to see those numbers level off, the threat only diminishes because of us, agenda goal. No, our viewers know curlover is inevitable. Most countries are now free and on the way home, Gates 1.
And then if we continue countrywide, and we're testing the right people to understand what's going on, which is not the case yet, those numbers will start to go down.
Understand what's going on, which is not the case yet. Keep waiting, we'll let you know when we're ready. Agenda false meme. Any amateur with a spreadsheet and World Health Organization daily data can know exactly what's going on. Gates 1. Those numbers will start to go down. Italy, Germany, Norway, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, United Kingdom, already clear and slipping from Gates' grasp. You didn't know that? Our viewers did.
And then we can look at some degree of opening back up.
Then we can look at some degree of opening back up. Agenda critical requirement, they'll decide when you can leave. Hint, vaccinated. If you leave now, you might realize you're already free and the threat of the virus is slight. Do the math.
President Trump's top health advisors are talking about somewhere between 100 and 240,000 deaths over the next 2 months. Does that sound about right to you in terms of the lethality and the length of the outbreak here in the U.S.?
Top health advisors, aka lying scum, agenda employees. Trump firing is, as we always said, you may not like him, but he's the only reason the US is free right now and not in their homes like the UK. Gates 1. 100 to 240,000 deaths. Invented figure, agenda strategy, absurd figure to scare. You obey, they drop the figure to reasonable, yours, but only if you obey. No, the real risk was always slight. Do the math. Gates 1. Does that sound about right to you? Media dupe or agenda employee? Agenda godsend, asking an agenda architect what he'd like the people to believe. Gates 1. Lethality and length. God forbid you do your own math. Agenda godsend, asking an agenda architect what he'd like the people to believe when the real data is publicly available. Now he gets to lie and you won't even notice. Gates 1. Here in the US, hint to Americans, try looking outside America. Agenda godsend, are people so self-absorbed they won't notice the rest of the world going free while they submit to the Gates agenda. Gates 1. 26 lies, falsehoods, actions against the people, and we're barely into the Gates-Wallace video. How asleep do you have to be to see none of this? This is obviously going to take a while, so I'll pause it there, let our regular viewers get a taste of what's coming, and continue in part 2. I'm Andrew Mather, a 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Right now, I wish I had just 1 hour on mainstream TV or 1 page in a leading newspaper. We'd be free and clear, or at least I'd hope so. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.